podcasting from a remote location somewhere deep in the heart of New York City. This is Crypto Characters, and I'm your host, Jason Nagi. Our guest for today is Andrea Tinianow, founder of the Delaware Blockchain Initiative back in 2015, and a regular consultant of various governmental jurisdictions about blockchain adoption. Andrea, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Jason.
Okay, so why don't we start by you telling us a little bit about yourself? I gave a very, very brief description, but why don't you let everyone know what the Delaware Blockchain Initiative is, what you did to get it started, and then we can also talk about the other work that you're doing with governments as well.
Sure. So I'm going to start by letting the audience know that, like you, I'm actually a lawyer. I'm a Delaware lawyer, and I had been working in business development for many years, and then I was in-house at a large corporation for 11 years as their number 2 lawyer, assistant general counsel, and a VP of business development. And then in 2014, I was recruited by then the Markell administration to join the Delaware Secretary of State's office. And they actually created a division based on my background. And they wanted someone who had both law and business development. And the division was designed to create economic opportunity for the state, to drive new revenue to the state. But they wanted, instead of typical economic development factors, they wanted to develop strategies based on the state's leading position in corporations and in corporate law. So that was my charge. That was what I was brought in to do, to create new revenue. And back in 2014, I started looking around for opportunities. And at some point in 2015, I learned about blockchain technology. And that seemed like, when I learned about blockchain technology, actually, I thought it just was too good to be true. And so that was one thing.
So tell me this: what did you do before you went when you went from corporate into the state? What did you do as a corporate person? Because it's a unique background.
Yeah. So when I was for 11 years working for this large corporate services company, at first I was really I like to think of myself as the problem solver for the company. You know, I was doing what normal general counsel do. They're developing policies and handling litigation, but I was also working to help product managers create new products and help them identify the risk and regulatory issues and help them navigate those issues. But what I found my sweet spot was when it sounds terrible, but really when people had problems, I saw opportunity. So I would help people, help product managers or help executives or whoever was having an issue. I would help them resolve the issue, but often that led to, like I said, opportunity and new revenue. And so at some point they made me, in addition to my legal role, I was wearing a business development role. And actually, within 2 years at this company, they asked me to run a business for them, a publishing business. And so maybe some of your readers are familiar with the books, the jurisdiction books that say, Delaware law is governing business entities or Nevada law is. That was a book that I developed for the company.
Really?
Yeah.
One of the things that I really appreciate about Delaware as a New York lawyer is that when you litigate there, things just move.
Yes, they do. Yes, that's by design. I mean, that's all part of the franchise. That is. They have a division of corporations that's highly responsive. The courts are just run like, I think they say like a 5-star hotel or whatever it is. But I was actually a law clerk in 2 of the courts, actually 3 of the courts. I was a law clerk in the Superior Court one summer, the trial court, and then my 3rd year of law school, I was a fellow to one of the justices now retired, Randy Holland, and I was there 20 hours a week as one of his clerks. So I was a clerk on the Delaware Supreme Court, and then when I graduated from law school, I was a clerk to the Chancellor at the time, Bill Chandler, for the Court of Chancery. So I have to say, while I was there, I knew it was pretty amazing. Like I every day, I really did want someone to pinch me because the lawyers that litigate in the Court of Chancery, they're they're such fine lawyers, and and you read the briefs, and to me it was like reading a novel, and I just loved it. And to have the opportunity to sit with the judge, of course the judge is elevated and you're sitting at the desk at ground level, but to hear those lawyers in court, it was a tremendous experience.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You don't really meet people that were functional lawyers that were also functional executives.
Yeah. It was interesting when I was interviewed, and I remember this when I was interviewed for the assistant general counsel position. Most of the senior managers, or some of them, would say, "Well, what's going to happen when we disagree, and you tell me I can't do what I want to do?" And I just said, "Why would I ever do that? We're in it to make money, And I think
Careful now.
I think that there's such a thing as reasonable risk, and you don't want to be reckless, but when you're developing a business, and I think risk is you have to tolerate risk, or you're just not going to succeed.
So, were you always business oriented, or is it something that you discovered later as a lawyer? Because normally it's lawyer. I didn't realize I had a business mind until I was a practicing lawyer for many years.
Jason, when I grew up, I was not allowed to go work. Well, my friends were going to work at the local ice cream store or the bagel store, and I had to have my own business. So when I was 12, I delivered newspapers, and I was the first girl, I think, in maybe all of Long Island, but certainly Rockville Center. And then I was babysitting, and then I had a children's party business by the time I was maybe 13 years old. And I was with my sister, on most weekends. We had a very successful party business. We did everything from setup.
13?
Maybe even 12. I think, my parents' friends were poaching me because I was a great babysitter. And so we made piñatas. I made birthday cakes. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I've always, of course, I really, it was my parents who said, you have to earn your own money, and so I did. I didn't really realize I had a choice, but we even had we had business cards. It was tic-tac-toe parties. There may be some folks who are listening who attended one of my birthday parties. Most of them probably were not born at the time, but yeah, no, I had birthdays. So it was just something that's always been with me. Absolutely.
Wow. All right. Well,
yeah. There you go.
How did you end up in law school then?
How did I end up in law? It was one of those things. I was doing marketing and business development for several years after college, and I just wanted to do something else. I wanted some more intellectual rigor. I wanted to do something that was going to make my brain hurt. And I'll tell you, not only did my brain start hurting when I went to law school, but I lost some of my eyesight as well, because that after a year of reading tiny print and horn books for 10 hours a day, I couldn't see the clock, and I had to get glasses.
It's funny, I unfortunately, it took me a lot less time to get to that. I had issues way before law school, but of late I've been doing a lot of detailed spreadsheet analysis to just looking at, trade analysis of certain things,
Sure.
for example. And I actually thought that my vision acuity had diminished within a 3-hour period, because by the time I was done, I could barely look.
Yeah.
So, some of that stuff is rough. I don't know how people look at spreadsheets all day. I think that's even worse than going to law school and reading for 3 years.
Yeah.
Personally. But.
Yes, they both take their toll.
Right. All right. So you went from really a corporate/legal background into the state of Delaware.
Yes, and I'll tell you, it was so interesting because when they hired me, I was very naive about government. I really didn't ask anybody what it would be like. They said, "We want you to come in, Andrea, and we want you to move the needle, and we want we were looking for new strategies to bring new revenue." And I said, "Okay, I'll do it. And I came in like a whirlwind. And I will tell you, every day, all I did was meet with people, because I was looking for those strategies. Like people, I was like this, what is that strategy? I went down so many different paths. I will tell you that I was meeting with folks in China. I was thinking, can I bring, yes, absolutely. Can I bring Chinese banks to Delaware? That was a strategy I was pursuing.
That's a very smart strategy.
And these Chinese banks, for a while, the policy in China, they were trying to come to the U.S. and they were having trouble. And I I was working with banking lawyers and folks in China, and then of course the Chinese policy changed, and so that went nowhere fast. But there were really quite a lot of policies that I was pursuing, and blockchain was one of them, and I thought it was promising. But I will tell you, it wasn't without, like I said, without a little bit of fear, because, like I said, I was reading whatever I could get in 2015, and there was not a lot. Mm-hmm. And then and talking to folks, and I would say, is this really true? Does this really happen like that? Like, are you joshing me? And of course I didn't do it by myself. As soon as I learned anything, I was telling my colleagues about it. My friends in the Division of Corporations and colleagues in the Secretary of State's office, and the bank commissioner. I mean, I wanted everyone to be in on this big secret. And people thought it was interesting. I mean, Delaware, they're very innovative there. I mean, Delaware was home to the first corporation, DuPont, the first modern corporation that was in Delaware. And
what year was that?
Oh, please don't ask me that. I don't remember. But
was it like 1700s?
I think so.
Or or like even 1600s?
Well, I think they supplied the fuel for. Did they supply the fuel for the Revolutionary War? So, but it was. But at some point, the DuPont company had a board of directors, and it was at that point that they needed the right structure, and that was what gave birth to that. At least that was on a podcast that I heard on NPR that DuPont was the first corporation. So Delaware does have a tradition of innovating, especially on legal structures, but in a lot of different ways. And what was really interesting is right around the time, or sometime after, we were all talking happily, really, that The Economist had their famous issue that said something like blockchain, the machine of trust. And I just felt so vindicated. And what was really interesting is that one of my colleagues sent to the Secretary of State an email that said something just like a simple line like, Andrea may be onto something. Yes. And so, so that was the beginning.
It sounds like Delaware is a unique state in that people really do pay attention to innovation there, and they use it to benefit the state.
Jason, well, here's the thing. What was innovative, I would tell you, is that the Markell administration hired me in the first place to have this role of, let's bring someone who knows about business and knows about law to find strategies. Yeah. I mean, I don't think that usually there's like an economic development person, and at the time there was somebody doing economic development, but traditional, let's bring companies here. Let's fight with the other states to bring the companies. What they were trying to do was organic, was creating something novel within the Department of State. And I think very few states do that. And frankly, what was very exciting when we started thinking about blockchain and how blockchain could be an economic driver in the state, and that led to proposals to change the law, and eventually the law did get changed in the summer of 2017, and that sort of ignited, its own chain reaction in other states, including, Wyoming and
That's
Nevada.
The big one right now,
Wyoming, right? Wyoming, very exciting.
Caitlin Loam has been just going she's been really working there for about a year, I think, and there's been some tremendous stuff coming out of it.
And she went to Wyoming in large part because Delaware started slowing down. That's how it happened. I mean, that's truly what happened, and good for her. And with and frankly, I was so supportive and continue to be supportive of everything they're doing, but not just in Wyoming, but in so many states. But I was telling you about something in Delaware, and you were saying about the innovation and the fact that they had somebody there, and what I think, right now there are a lot of states that are passing legislation to enable or to require the different groups to form committees to explore blockchain and how they could use blockchain in their state. And in some states, Colorado, I know, I talked to a lot of jurisdictions and a lot of people in the jurisdictions. So I have not an exhaustive handle on what's going on, but I have a pretty decent handle. and so what's interesting to me is that you have a lot of legislation, and some of it I think makes a lot of sense. Some of it I think is a bit superfluous, or it's what maybe you call window dressing. But in some cases, like I said, you've got legislation, and the legislation requires the formation of a committee to explore how technology can be used in the state. But what I would say.
That sounds kind of ridiculous. That you don't
listen,
need legislation to form a committee.
No,
I mean,
listen. But here,
like
but
you need
but
a sign to tell someone about a sign.
Yeah, but there is reason for that, because two reasons. You want to make sure it happens,
right?
If you don't have that legislation, it may just never happen, or administrations change, or people leave office, and when they leave, the committee could leave with them. So I think there's often a lot of good. Sometimes there's appropriation with those committees, and they get resources. So, but here's the thing. I think first of all, two things. I think that if a state is going to use blockchain technology as an economic driver to bring new revenue, to provide greater services to their citizens, and for perhaps other reasons, I think it's important that the executive branch get behind it. I think that's really important. I mean, you can have the legislative branch, and frankly, it's great to have the legislators passing laws to make things happen, but I do think the executive branch is pretty darn important. But here's the thing. They could, most states have somebody who could take this on, and somebody who could say, listen, I'm your guy or I'm your gal. And private sector, we want to talk to you. We've got records. Are there records that you could use if they were either in digital format or on a blockchain? Let's talk about it. Because if states have nothing else, they have information and data and databases. And that's sort of a perfect match for blockchain technology.
So now, you and I, when we were talking before we started, you kind of mentioned about how it was, I think you called it oil in the ground.
Well, here's the thing. Yeah. So
great analogy.
Yeah. So right now, most states, like I say, people file information with the states, and states regulate, and they collect taxes, and they provide some services, right? But they really they collect so much information, everything from birth certificates to death certificates to health information to marriage certificates, and not just states, but think about school districts. So many records that, again, and I say this, I don't expect anyone's privacy to be violated here, but information that if it were digitized and or recorded to a blockchain would be a treasure trove for companies in the private sector that would be, I would imagine, would be thrilled to partner with the state or the school district or whomever, partner or work with them or pay for that data.
So I'm curious, what kind of data are you talking about? I'm not trying to put you on the spot or be specific,
fine.
But
I'm going to make it so easy,
birth
Jason.
or death records.
I'm going to make it so
example.
easy. Well, yeah. there are a few. So in the state of Delaware, when we launched the Blockchain Initiative, the first project we were working on was public records. These are public records. These are records that anyone.
Right.
Now you'd say right, public records. They're public. In Delaware, these records, if you want a public record, you have to make a request to, I think you could send a letter or maybe an email. Maybe you have to go there in person. But these records are not indexed by category, by topic. So let's say you wanted information about the coast, and you're interested. You're doing a paper, and you want data and information and recollections about the Delaware coastline going back since Delaware was a colony or something like that. There wouldn't be a way for them to do a unified search. They would have to go, I think there may be 200 databases or 200 distinct indices of all their records or more. I can't remember. But
then they go back that far?
Well, it's Delaware's, colony, and I think I know that they have pictures, they have photographs. I mean, they have data,
wow.
they have documents. Okay. Yeah. So the idea was to create a new way of keeping track of records and start digitizing them, and then as new digital information became part of the public records domain, that digital information would just be recorded to a blockchain. So imagine right now, companies like, what was the company?
LexisNexis?
No. The one that does talks about your history, Ancestry.
Oh, right. Yeah. There's a couple of them, like
there are
23
few. Yeah, there are few. But but companies like Ancestry, they have contracts with the state. And
they do?
Yeah, sure.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. And the state get pennies. But
the
imagine
states get pennies?
Yeah, pennies for what the So imagine if the states were able to digitize their public records, all 50 of them, and let's say they were all in a blockchain. Now imagine how to think about that revenue stream. It doesn't take, once you start thinking about it, it really doesn't take a lot to jog the imagination of what states could do. One state alone, states together, if they were to take their information and put it on a blockchain and make it available through smart contracts.
That's quite true.
Imagine. So we talk about public records. So what kind of information? Of course.
And by the way, I ask that really from a curious perspective.
Of course.
Because you don't really hear about the types of, you hear, you can do this I'm going to put my chair on a blockchain and, fractionalize the interest.
Exactly, exactly.
Hey,
this is a little different.
Right. So I'm curious, what other categories of data do you think states could monetize?
Well, the big nut in Delaware, of course, it was, and this is, I know they're still working on it, but when we launched the Delaware Blockchain Initiative, we talked about 3 projects: the public archives, corporate registrations.
Right.
Corporate registrations. And taking that information, putting that on a blockchain, and then making that information available through stock ledgers and other smart contracts so that people could issue their shares right on a blockchain. Financing statements, UCC 1s and 3s, and all of those right now they're filed, but they're static. They're like dumb documents. But if the data from the UCCs were on a blockchain, so that's the so just for your audience members who aren't lawyers or lenders or debtors,
right?
The lenders will file financing statements or UCC 1s to protect the security interests they take in the borrower's collateral.
Right.
So as between a borrower and a lender, they don't need to file anything. They have an agreement. But if there are other lenders that are looking to take a security interest in the same collateral, the first lender that files is first in time and first in right.
That is. And those are 2 very important words. Well, I guess 4. 6. First in time and first in right.
So they file these UCCs, but right now they're so error prone, and they're, if you make a mistake in the way you there really isn't a lot of information that goes on the financing statement, but if they're not filed perfectly, the filing could be rendered ineffective, and then the filer could lose their place in line. There
was a big case about that. I think it was maybe 2-3 years ago. I forget the name of the bank that was involved, but it was a $1 billion mistake.
Yeah, it was a mistake because the lender filed a termination, and it basically made their security interest, they lost priority. And so the debtor would have, they lost their right to a claim on the collateral because the collateral went to pay the other lenders that had security interests. So,
right.
So that's a problem. And if you created a financing statement that was a smart contract, then you could really make it foolproof, right? And you could have all sorts of bells and whistles for notifications. As we both know, that most financing statements only last five years, and then you can only file an amendment to that in the last 6 months. So that's a UCC 3. And anyway, there's all sorts of ways you could create smart contracts to protect both not only the interests of the lender but also the borrower. So
anticipate it benefiting the borrower just from a clarity of information, from knowing whether or not there's a valid lien, or is it something else?
Well, this actually came up in a jurisdiction I was visiting, one person was explaining that how cool it would be if you're the borrower and your UCC was somehow tied to the payments that you make to pay off the loan. And then as soon as your loan is paid, the security interest, or it could be reflected on the ledger. And so as you're paying down your loan, you have more equity to use to take additional loans out.
That's a perfect example.
Amazing,
how
right?
Work. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah,
but you're right.
I didn't either. But there are other protections. Basically anyone can file. So like I said, so there are other ways that debtors could be protected, but I can't. It's been a while. But yeah, but the I think protections go both ways, to the creditor and to the debtor.
Okay, so tell me about what you see states looking for and where you see states trying to innovate with blockchain. And we can also include in that the states that have kind of moved as far along as you've seen, what they've done, what you think the benefits are, where you think their issues are.
Sure.
And also, let's get back also to the Delaware Blockchain Initiative. I'd like to hear kind of where that left off, because you're no longer with the Delaware Blockchain Initiative.
No, I'm no longer with the state of Delaware. I
Delaware,
left. Yeah, I left at the end of 2017. So I've been so it's been a little over a year, and as you mentioned, I've been consulting, and that's been going well. But I'm still of course interested in what's going on in Delaware, and I have friends. They have a working group that is working with the Division of Corporations to, I don't even know if they call it the Delaware Blockchain Initiative anymore. They may call it something else. There was a new governor that came in. The former governor, Jack Markell, was termed out. He was a very popular governor, and then John Carney came in 2017, and he actually promoted the former division head, the Division of Corporations head, Rick Eisenberger, and they brought in a new Division Corporations head, and they just took a different approach, a slower approach. And, the proof is in the pudding, because it's now 2019 and we haven't really seen anything. So they're doing their thing. I hear that they're still working on the UCC project. They're working on the corporations project. I think they abandoned the public archives project. But listen, what I'm excited about is like I said, what we did in Delaware, got people thinking, and set off a chain reaction, I think. So that's all good.
And so the question is, I thought that they had actually passed a law that permitted companies to use blockchain.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the summer of 2017, and here's something you had mentioned about Delaware and innovation. And one of the innovations is that we have something called the Corporation Law Council, and it's a group of lawyers, and they meet regularly to identify amendments to the corporate law and the alternative entities law, the LLC law, partnership law, trust law. And so you have this group, and that's really what they do. I don't know that there are a lot of jurisdictions where lawyers meet regularly to update the corporate law.
I don't think there are any, quite frankly.
So, but in Delaware, this is a tremendous innovation. And so in 2016, when the governor asked the Corporation Law Council, they said, listen, would you please amend the law to enable blockchain shares or distributed ledger shares? I mean, he asked the council to do that, and he did that in the spring of 2016. And by the fall, they were already looking at drafts. They did research. I mean, they worked through the summer. They took it very, very seriously, and in the end, they recommended legislation to the state legislature, and the state legislature voted on it and adopted the new law.
Have any companies used that yet?
I think many companies are. And in fact, Yes, I know that. I know that anecdotally. I mean, it's not like they're keeping stats, but I know that companies are. Well, here's what's interesting about the way they wrote it in the law. They don't say you can use a blockchain or you can use a database. In the past, and this is the reason why the law was modified, was amended, was because the law had expressly stated that an officer would update the records, or when the officer updates the records, blah, 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 blah. And that created some ambiguity about whether or not records could be updated by something other than a person, other than a human being. And so they considered putting blockchain in the text. They considered a whole lot of things. And in the end, they used language like the company can use databases and networks to maintain their records, or something along those lines. And I think in the epilogue language or the preface language, they talk about blockchain technology. So yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that Delaware companies are using databases and networks, and to maintain their records. So,
what do you think about what Wyoming has done? Let's talk about their laws, because I think they're the farthest along.
Well, Wyoming is they are bringing clarity. I think what they're really doing is they're looking for any place where there is ambiguity and where there is confusion, and there is a opportunity for problems or issues in commercial transactions dealing with crypto, digital assets. They are like I said, they're laying the tracks and creating clarity with the idea that to bring business, to bring institutional crypto business to the state. They want to be the place, and so far I think they're very innovative. They're creating banks for crypto. They've defined digital assets. We talked about UCC financing statements and
UCC's Uniform Commercial Code.
Right? And for those, again, Uniform Commercial Code is a code that states adopt, and it sets forth the rules for commercial transactions. And and generally in the UCC, they talk about types of property, and one type of property is intangible property. And up until now, intangible property, there are different types of intangible property, but one type of intangible property is securities. And and what Wyoming did was they created a chapter that explains that you can have digital assets as another type of intangible property. And they created a whole regime for how digital assets can be held and owned and basically managed in a way that does not violate the nature of cryptocurrency. It enables crypto owners to own their crypto directly, but at the same time allowing for custodians to hold them on their behalf, basically based on Baylor Bailey law. So they're not giving up their ownership rights.
Well, so let's kind of go into that a little bit more.
Sorry, I laid a lot there, but basically I want to say about Wyoming that they really are laying the tracks, creating a lot of creating the regulatory framework for crypto transactions, crypto business, and qualified custodians.
And I think that it's important because there is nothing that's particularly new outside of the medium for cryptocurrency, for example. And all of the laws that we have should be sufficient to apply to the way that a lot of the transactions work. But it doesn't mean that that's going to happen. And when you try to implement it or try to enforce it, you can get a court that doesn't really understand the technology to completely botch something up. And you really don't want laws that are not clear getting in your way when you're trying to grow an industry and take a technology that's as important as blockchain, distributed ledger technology, whatever the particular name you want to use for it, and create ambiguity there. So I think it's good. I think it's a good point that you make that they're using Baylor law. You can go ahead.
I can tell you what that is,
yeah.
Baylor. Really. So I think you're right. I think any time when you have a lack of clarity, there's risk. when there's clarity, there's less risk. And actually, that's why so many companies do use Delaware law, because there are so many rules that have been defined over, hundreds of years, really, of law, of lawmaking, judge-made law, that create rules around corporations. Now, what I think is going to happen in Wyoming is that you're going to have lots of law that will be created around crypto, because companies will be incorporated there, they'll be doing business there, there'll be disputes there, and they will have courts that will interpret Wyoming law. Baylor-Bailey law. So what you learn in law school is that if you you go to Amtrak, or you go to the train station and you leave your suitcase with them, if you can still do that. I'm not sure if they still have that service, but at one time you could do that. Or
dry cleaners, or
you go to the dry cleaning, and you're not giving them your car. No, you're leaving it there for them to take care of it on your behalf. You are still the owner. You still have property rights. It's just that they're taking care of it for you. And that's the essence of Baylor-Bailey law. They don't get to own it if you don't come back. I don't even think you get to own it if you don't come back. They have to turn it over to the police, or there's all sorts of other rules.
And that's state dependent too. I think that, you'll see this, I think in like dry cleaning stores in New York City, they tell you that if your clothing is left for 90 days, they get to keep it.
They get to keep it.
So that's part of the New York Baylor-Bailey law.
Yeah, perhaps, or it may actually be a street law may kick in, and that means that companies that have other people's stuff, let's say gift cards or checks that haven't been cashed, they don't get to keep it. They have to escheat it to the jurisdiction where the individual is from, or where the corporation is, where the company is incorporated, and that money goes to the jurisdiction.
Goes to the state.
It goes to the state, and in Delaware, actually, escheat is quite a big business, because you can imagine how many corporations have stuff stuff owned by other people, and those companies are incorporated in Delaware, and they can't find those people, so money gets escheated back to the state of Delaware.
If you've ever driven down the BQE in Brooklyn, there's a giant building. It's called the Williamsburg Savings Bank Tower, I think.
Yeah.
It's a condo development now. But up until, I guess, in the late 2000s, you would drive by, you'd see it. It had the clock tower on it. That was taken from funds that were left unclaimed in the Bank of Williamsburg. And it's a giant building, and it was built in like the 40s maybe, or earlier than that. It's an Art Deco building, so it was built a long time ago. So yeah, there's a lot of just stray property.
Stray property. There you go. So Baylor-Bailey law. Wyoming's leading the way, and states are following. What's interesting about what Wyoming did after Delaware, Wyoming emulated Delaware and passed a law allowing companies to maintain their records on a blockchain. But unlike Delaware, where you actually have to, in your stock registry, you have to have the name of the beneficial owner, or the owner, or their agent. Wyoming allows a string of code to be representing the owner. So basically, it allows for tokenized securities, and you don't actually need to under Wyoming state law. You may have federal law that would require the issuer to know who the owner is, but by Wyoming law really gives a lot of leeway to the owners and the issuers.
So that's actually pretty good for Wyoming law, because once you get over 2,000, I think it's 2,000 holders, generally speaking, under 12G, you have to report. You're a public reporting company. There's all sorts of issues that you have that you kind of want to stay away from, and having to know the identities of the holders of your digital assets, especially if they're being fractionalized, can become a really big problem. So
yes. So some other interesting, other states have, I'll just some of the things that I've seen that are pretty interesting. A while back, I want to say 2016, maybe 2017, Vermont passed a law which says, in essence, that information that comes off of a blockchain can't be challenged in court, as for evidence, for evidentiary purposes. I thought that was pretty interesting. And several states have said a digital signature is a signature. A smart contract can't be invalidated because or can serve as a contract. I'm just trying to think of some other ones. Oh, Ohio has a law now which allows, I think, businesses to pay tax, use business tax with crypto. Of course, they just convert it right away. But that's I saw also California, I think in the last day, is proposing, one of their state assembly members proposed that cannabis business owners be permitted to use stable coins that have a one-to-one backing with the dollar, or I guess a similar asset to pay. So that's very unique. We know that West Virginia did voting for their, and that I thought that was just great. They did that for a reason. Allowed military who were not in the state, and maybe there were some who were in the state but who couldn't vote to use a blockchain app to vote. And I thought that was pretty progressive and solved a problem. But
that's a great idea.
It's a great idea, but I will see if it's a one-off, or it will be something that will be expanded. But again, I think that when you have, I think there are problems to be solved, but also opportunities to be made and opportunities to be found. One of my favorite ideas has to do with school districts and putting some of the information about parents and children on a blockchain. I'd love a smart contract, frankly, that allows me at the beginning of the school year, or maybe when my child, or if my children were little, to do all the permission slips like all at once. Because I can tell you, I have 3 children, and for, 14 years, 15 years, I've been signing with these permission slips. And why? Don't they know who? Like, why? I would pay for that. I'd pay for that service. But there are other services that.
It's actually it's a good point, because you have to keep filling them out.
Filling that form out, my goodness. And think about the paper. Think about the time. Somebody is printing that form out and taking it back. It could just be like a few clicks. Click, done.
Yeah.
Done.
You're right. That would be nice.
That would be nice. But I think that once you really start thinking about what kind of data, whether it's libraries, DMV, it's at the district level, marriage certificates digitized. As people get married and divorced, I would think the private sector would want to know about that. That could be a great source of revenue.
It'd be good data to have, because it's really psychologists and all the people that study things like that. It's valuable data to have.
Oh, but Jason, not psychologists, marketers and companies and insurance companies and doctors. I mean,
good point.
I think the world, we need to think about it differently. The state needs to think about their data differently. Jurisdictions need to think about their data differently. And I think they could start having forums and roundtables. And frankly, I'd love to see, we keep on seeing blockchain hackathons. I'd love cities and counties and states to have hackathons where they invite people to tell them how they can operationalize and monetize their data so that they can start bringing in new revenue. I think there's so much there, and people just have to think about governments differently.
That's a really good point about the data. Data, what did someone that I read something where data is the new gold or something like that?
Everything's the new gold. Yeah,
I know, right? Except gold is still,
gold. Like, I'll take the gold, Jason.
Right on. So, I've always been curious about this. You see these things, blockchain hackathon. Mm. What are they hacking exactly? They're really just programming, right? I mean, they're
but what they're doing,
stuff.
I think what they're trying to do is there are folks who know. I think for the most part, it's Ethereum-based smart contracts. People who know how to use that, and I think a lot of them come with an idea, but they're trying to solve an idea, solve a problem, or or they've been working on a problem and it gives them a platform. Excuse me. I know that there was just a hackathon, a global legal hackathon all over the world, and I was actually a judge last year in New York City.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. And the apps were cool. Criminal justice and, excuse me, I'm going to cough again. There were so many creative people, and this.
I'd say God bless you, but it's not appropriate to say that with a cough. Do you want some water?
I'll take a little bit more.
All right, I'll get
like
you
I
some
said,
water.
I'm good. Here's the thing. The technology, people need to think about, you've got the technology on the one hand, you've got information on the other, you've got problems, and it's really about marrying it. And when you bring hackathons, what I think is great about the hackathons is you bring a lot of smart, creative people together for an extended period of time, and they're really thinking hard about something. And I think that's very powerful. That's great.
Okay, so now we're gonna get to not really our final question, but our final
couple of questions.
Exactly.
All right.
And so, you've been in the business world, you've been in the state world, you've been in the legal world.
Yes.
I want to know what you think you can call it your biggest lesson, your best lesson, the most important thing, but take all your experiences together and give me one or two of what you think are the key takeaways or rules to live by.
Jason, I knew this question was coming, and my answer is pithy.
Good.
Get it in writing.
Yeah, I like that.
It serves you well in government. It serves you well in the law, and it serves you well in business, and for many reasons. When you get something in writing, especially you're doing something with other people, it forces you to reduce to writing, your ideas, and you can very clearly, not 100% accuracy, but are you all literally on the same page, because you've written down what the ideas are, and then of course you've got memories fading, right? Memories fade. That's not what I said. Kind of the blockchain way. Get it in writing, put it on a blockchain. Right. It's a way for everybody to go back and say, yes, this is what we agreed. Now, of course, someone could, throw the piece of paper away, but generally speaking, between not writing something down and writing something down is just such a good idea. But it really does. It forces you to think through processes and helps you find issues or problems, and just a good idea. Just I've in my career I learned the hard way. I once had a group that said, we really want you to create this book. It was when I was running the book business, and we're going to sell it to all of our customers. And I said, okay. And I went and I created this amazing book. And they said, oh, that's a great book. And I said, but you're going to pay for it, right? This is another division. No, we're not going to pay for it. Oh, okay. That was a $75,000 lesson I learned, $75,000, because that's what it cost me to make the book. It's just important. It's just important. And when you do contracts, I believe in, to the extent you can, you write down the ideas first, and then you put it into a contract, and if you have the time, do letters of intent. But I just think writing things down is just a good idea.
Well, as a lawyer, I agree with you on that. And I try to have everything written down whenever possible, just because there's a ton of possibility for confusion unless it's in writing. So I think that's great advice.
Yeah, but I do think writing something on a blockchain is like the best thing. I'm waiting for that app.
Yeah, you're right. Well, I mean, would it be in an app that does more than if-then language to write it on a blockchain?
Sure.
I like it.
Create that document. Write it right on the blockchain.
There
Provenance of the document. Who's touched it? Who's done stuff to it?
I like it. I like it.
Okay, there you go.
So now I'd like to hear where you see blockchain going in the next 3 years, and then the next, I'd say 10, but I think 10 is too far. And let's say the next 5 years, because this is a rapidly developing industry. It intersects with regulation on various levels, and in both state level, federal level, and national level, and international level. So, where do you see it going in the next 3 years? Well, where do you think we are now? Where do you see it happening in 3 years, and then where do you see the real future, which is 5 years from now?
The real future. I think we're moving at a nice clip. I think there was a lot of euphoria and excitement, which has fallen away around tokenizing and raising money through tokens. But I think you have some serious projects that are out there, and especially in the capital markets, and using tokens for financing, but creating securities that are legitimate and compliant. I think you'll see more regulation, but a responsive and effective regulatory framework which will allow for investment. And I think we will see more adoption, and then at some point there'll be a tipping point, and then we'll see a lot more.
Right on. So now, where do you think that tipping point is? You think the tipping point occurs when you have enough of the basic foundations where you can just put something on a blockchain, so you've got all of the layers kind of ready, or do you think it happens before then?
I think we need to see blockchain affecting people's lives. I think that once you have a blockchain that is creating value, whether it's monetary value, whether it's making people's lives better for the future, impacting the way you live, I think once we start to have that, people will, and when I say people, I mean like CEOs of companies will start to champion it, and we have the early adopters now, but they're few and far between, and we need more champions. And so we need to highlight the successes and then bring on the others. So
now I do think you're right that the capital markets is where it's coming from right now, and I think that's going to drive a lot.
Can I actually jump in?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Because you know what? Actually, I wanted to mention in this in this talk that this what I said about sort of the champions and the early adopters. I believe in this so much that this is the way it will happen, that I actually launched for the Wall Street Blockchain Alliance a new working group called the Enterprise Solutions Working Group, because I want to create a platform to highlight successful implementations at the institutional level. Because I think that if you have a neutral body like the Wall Street Blockchain Alliance that is saying this is real, this is actually happening, here are the players, here are the people involved, and you start extracting from the success stories, how did they get started, and what are the standards, and what were the problems, and how did they overcome them? It will give others the roadmap and the, I want to say, confidence that they can do it too. So that I did want to mention, because that's in the works. And if any of your listeners are interested, they can find me on Twitter or LinkedIn, and they can reach out.
And we'll put all that stuff in the notes too, so that they can have it. So Enterprise Solutions. Let's get out of the Star Trek motif. Why don't you just say what that is? Because
here's what it is. Here's what it is. On the one hand, you have sort of retail, people who are buying tokens or using services, but when we're talking about institutional or enterprise solutions, we're looking at a company or an organization that is deploying blockchain technology in production that's being integrated with their services or new services for their partners, customers, clients, that sort of thing.
How many companies are you seeing getting there? Are we a couple of years from that still, or are there actual companies?
I will tell you that I know it is happening.
Oh, it is?
It is happening. I can't. Yes.
I don't want you to say the company.
No, I can't. I know. No, it's happening.
That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting. Like I said, I'm hoping with this group that we will shine a light on organizations that are deploying blockchain technology, and whether we do videos or white papers. But the idea is really to get the word out that it's real. And I want us to be like, the good housekeeping seal of approval. Like, it's real because we are a group and we are telling the truth.
We'll get a stamp that says WSBA.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
All right. Okay. So what's next for you? What projects do you have going on? I want to hear.
Besides
wanna hear about that.
WSBA,
Right.
and besides the clients that I'm working with, I actually have a fun little project on the side that I'm hoping will be ready to launch very, very soon.
Let's hear it.
It's an app.
Okay.
It's an app. It's an app called Connector Street, and it's an app that enables the user to make introductions, to introduce two people with like 3 taps, 3 clicks. So it makes making introductions like fast, easy, fun, secure. And actually we're using cryptography to secure everyone, all the identities. And eventually they will probably be on a blockchain too.
That's a great idea. I like that. So you don't have to send an email. You just click on.
No, click. It's like I make so many introductions, Jason. And this is long in coming. I'm telling you, I've been working on this for a long time. And I'm not coding. I work with a great team, but I just wanted to be able to go click on my contacts, click. What kind of message? It has default messages, so you don't even have to type anything.
That's great.
Or you can edit it, and then you could have a library actually of customized messages. But it's really click, done. You've been introduced, and then each person gets a message via email and or text, and they can see the message. They see the message from me, and then they can easily just click and get the other person's contact information right into their contacts, and actually both of the two people being introduced, if they want to send a text to the other one, it's pre-populated. You click and it goes, "Hi, great to meet you. So nice to meet you."
That's awesome. I'm signing up. You tell me when it's out. Let me know, and then I'm gonna get it.
Well, I can make you a beta tester, but it will be free, and I'm hoping we'll beta test very soon.
I'm curious about that. How is that monetized? So because you're right, there's very few apps that you can actually sell. So and this is maybe a subject for a completely different podcast.
Yes.
But did you get very deep in monetization of apps or?
This one, yes, I do have a few business models for this app, and I can tell you that people have asked us if they could license it. So yes, we could white label it, powered by Connector Street. We're looking for sponsors. I'm hoping that there may be a coffee shop or a movie theater that would like to be part of the app, where you could send 2 people to go to the movies, or send them to your local coffee shop and send them digital money. The third one is conferences, companies, universities, verticals who may want to encourage people to introduce each other, may just say, use the app, go at it,
Right.
And also when you go to events,
right.
You're meeting people, and what a great way, Jason, let's say you meet someone for the first time, and as you're hearing, you're saying, what are you working on? And then you have people you can start making introductions for them right then and there. But then what it does is you can take their picture and you get their contact information, and now you have their information in your contacts. And you're doing them a favor, because now you're making introductions.
That's a great idea. So,
yeah. And then my daughter had this idea, because I have a daughter who's a freshman in college, and she's helping me with this. And so I need her perspective. She keeps me sane. And her idea was, Mommy, we can create a whole new industry of matchmakers. We're going to bring matchmaking back.
That's awesome. I love it.
Yeah. So she wants to do that.
Very entrepreneurial.
Yeah, that's what we do.
That's great. All right. Okay. So why don't we get your Twitter handle?
Yeah.
Your other than blockchain Czarina, which I should have said right off the bat that you're the blockchain Czarina.
I am. Yeah. Marco Santori gave me that name way back when. In the beginning, I was a little embarrassed, but now I go with it.
You should. It's a great name.
It's a fun name. Yeah.
So let's hear your Twitter. You're a Forbes contributor too, right?
I am. Yeah. And I write for Forbes.com, and I love that. That to me, that's so much fun, because I will tell you, I see story ideas everywhere I go. I'm always, the people in this industry are working on so many exciting things, but novel legal issues and all sorts of exciting topics to write about. So that's just like you like doing these podcasts. I love having the opportunity to learn. And if you look at my articles, you'll see they're pretty varied. But I do try to find cutting edge or controversial topics.
That's good stuff. I like it.
It is, yeah.
All right, and so your Twitter is what?
It's just me, Andrea Tinianow.
Okay.
I think Andrea Tinianow, Twitter and LinkedIn, and yeah, you can find me that way.
Oh, great. So that's how people get in touch with you, and we'll put
Yeah.
your information at the bottom of
Sure.
in the notes of this as well. And thank you for coming to the podcast.
Thank you, Jason. It's been a pleasure.
All right. See you soon.
Yep.
Bye, everybody.